Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to stately Vaughan Manor. And it is that time of the week again. It is time for my weekend reading report, the time where Roger and myself will talk to you about all of the things I've read during the past week, which this week wasn't much, because this past week has been absolutely terrible. It has been a nightmare, disastrous, in fact. Not only was my schedule upended, but we have gotten a series of terrible storms here in Northern California, a place where terrible storms are not supposed to happen. I suspect sorcery. Yes, I cannot prove this, but I suspect that Roger here, don't try to deny it, I suspect Roger over here of concocting these storms from some magical book like the Necronomicon. You see, Roger has been bitter ever since I've told him he can't buy any more books because I'm on the 500 book challenge, a challenge where I cannot buy any more books until I read 500 books I already own. Now, Roger actually buys all of the books for me, and I've told him he can't do that anymore, and it's one of his favorite things to do. So, because he's so bitter, using magic, he concocted all of these storms to batter California and the manor. Don't try to deny it, I know it's true. I don't have any proof, but it's just the kind of thing Roger would do. So, we've had storm after storm after storm. Now, here's the thing with the manor. If we get even a little bit of rain here, the manor floods. It loves to flood. And so long ago, we set up a drainage system, kind of a complex drainage system. And over in the northwest corner of the manor, we've got an automatic sump pump. And over at the southeast corner, we have an automatic sump pump. So normally, during the storms, it just pumps all the water away and everything's fine. But late one night, during a terrible storm, one of the worst storms we've ever seen here in Northern California, at least in a while, the sump pump at the southeast corner, the southwest corner, yes, the southwest corner, no, the southeast corner. Anyway, that sump pump over there, it failed. And the south side of the house gets the worst. So that sump pump failed in the middle of the night. But of course, I suspect sabotage. Yes, I suspect a certain undead mummy who lives here at the manor sabotaged the sump pump in the middle of the night, so that when I got up the next morning and looked out the window, all I saw was water. It was like I was in a houseboat. I just looked out the window and I looked down and all I saw was water. Water everywhere. Stuff's floating by like pieces of wood and rubbish is floating by the house. And it was all water. So I had to get the little portable pump we've got and pump all the water out. And it was still raining and there's more storms. And this sump pump is toast. And wouldn't you know it, nobody has sump pumps around here to buy because everybody needs them. So they're all sold out everywhere. So I had to order a sump pump, and it didn't get here until today. And so finally, the sump pump is replaced just in time for another storm. I didn't replace it myself. The lady of the manor replaced the pump. I mean, it's wet out there. You don't expect me to go out there and do it. No. So yeah, the lady of the manor replaced the sump pump. Hopefully no undead monster will destroy it in the middle of the night. You never know. So yeah. So because of all of these storms and work and other things, I haven't been able to read half as much as I would like to, as I would have liked to. I did read a teensy bit of this book that I've been reading a bit here and there. Not much. Basically, I just read to the point. This is the biography of Edgar Rice Burroughs by Erwin Porks. Basically, I just got to the part where Edgar Rice Burroughs is selling a lot of his early manuscripts. He's quit his day job. Everybody thinks he's crazy, including him, but he did it. And basically, he's in a position that if he doesn't sell everything he writes, he's toast too, much like my sump pump. So he has to sell everything he writes, and he does. And he moves to California, which is usually a good idea, particularly if you don't have an undead mummy who's vengeful living in your house. So that's as far as I got with that. But I did manage to read 2 books this week. I finished The Mad King by Edgar Rice Burroughs, part of my Edgar Rice Burroughs deep dive. If you're keeping score of the 500 book challenge, this is book number 19. So I finished book number 19. It was this one, The Mad King. Now this is an adventure novel written in the tradition of The Prisoner of Zenda. So it's that kind of story where you have a fictional European kingdom and we have an American adventurer type who goes to this kingdom because his mother is from this kingdom. So he goes there and has a series of adventures and is mistaken for the king because, heck, he just happens to look exactly like the king, who is crazy and is locked away. But is he really crazy? All kinds of political shenanigans are going on in this kingdom of Lutha. And he has a series of really cool adventures. There's a lot of action in this book. It started off a little, but right away it got good. And this was a tremendously entertaining adventure novel, I have to say. I really liked this one a lot. And it's interesting for a couple of reasons. First of all, in this type of story, the type of story that, because there were a lot of stories like this that were influenced by The Prisoner of Zenda, stories where you have a fictional European kingdom and mistaken identity and all that kind of thing. Usually in stories like that, you don't really know where this kingdom is. In Europe, it's kind of vague, the location, and also the time when the story takes place very often is kind of vague. And so it usually has kind of a fairy tale quality to it. Not this book, though. You know exactly when and where this fictional country of Lutha is placed and when the story takes place. The fictional country of Lutha borders Austria and Serbia, and it takes place right at the beginning of the First World War when Europe is in turmoil or getting that way. And so it's interesting because the very fact that you know when and where this story takes place and that real life political events are influencing what happens in this story gives it more of a sense of realism than it otherwise would. Also, the character of Barney Custer, the American in this story, is a more realistic hero than you normally get from Burroughs, or at least than you normally think of. A lot of times I think when people think of Edgar Rice Burroughs' heroes, they tend to think that they're all kind of cut from the same cloth, that they're all basically the same character with different names, and that is not true at all. Barney is much different from John Carter and is also much different from Tarzan. Tarzan is also much different from John Carter. So his characters are actually tend to have their own personalities. They tend to be their own characters. Barney is much different from John Carter. He's much more fallible, and he has a really good sense of humor. And he is a big, strong, brave guy, but he's also kind of young and impulsive. Got a good sense of humor, much like Burroughs himself did. But he also makes a lot of mistakes. He is not infallible at all. In fact, a lot of the adventure in this is caused because of his mistakes or the things that basically him failing at whatever he's trying to do. He does have his successes, but he has a lot of failures too. And so every time he attempts something in this book, you're like, you know, is he going to be able to pull this off? Because you never know with this guy. And he faces some pretty strong odds in this book. And that makes it all the more enthralling. And he's a likable character, Barney. And there's a scene that really points out in this book just how different he is from John Carter, because there's a part where Austria has invaded Luther and capture Barney, take him to a courtyard, and are about to line him up against a wall, and he realizes, this is a firing squad, you know? I'm about to be put up against a firing squad. And there are all these soldiers here with guns, and he's thinking, you know what? I could just grab one of these guns and shoot it out with these guys, and at least I would go down fighting, you know? At least I would, you know, show these guys that they just can't take me down without a fight. But then he thinks, what's the point? You know, this sense of apathy overwhelms him, and he thinks, what? So I grab a gun and I kill a couple of these guys? Do I really want to kill a couple of these guys? They're just following orders, you know, and I would die anyway. So there would be 2 more people dead or 3 more people dead who wouldn't be dead otherwise, and I would be just as dead at the end of it. Now, this is an attitude that you would never see from John Carter. Not only would John Carter fight it out with these guys, he'd probably win. Not so Barney. Barney acts in a much more realistic way. He does get out of it, but I'm not going to tell you how. So it's a really fun book. It also, because you know where and when this story takes place, and you have a good idea about the kingdom of Luther by the end of it, you also know the very likely fate that this country is going to face at the end of this story, because you know where and when it takes place. Very likely, by the end of this story, the kingdom is going to be overrun, and it will probably lose its independence, because that was what happened in this place at this time. So that is it. Knowing that as you're reading along, it kind of gives a sense of tragedy to the whole thing, unintentionally, because of course Burroughs was writing this at the time when all these events were taking place. He had no idea how things were going to turn out, but we do. So that makes it interesting. And of course, we never hear from Barney Custer again after this story. I have a feeling his end was not a good one. So there was that. Now, next, I intended to read this right away, which is Astounding Science Fiction Magazine from January 1951, but I didn't. I ended up picking up this book. This is Apocrypha, written by Carol Wainwright, who is not really Carol Wainwright. It's really written by The Falcon. The Falcon is a booktuber, so this is a book by a booktuber. And this is a pseudonym. Unless, of course, Carol Wainwright is The Falcon's real name, and The Falcon is a pseudonym. Or I guess it could be that he actually has even a different name than The Falcon. Or Carol Wainwright, who knows? Who knows? It's a mystery. This is a mysterious character, The Falcon. Great channel, though. Great booktube channel. I'll link him down below. He has some controversial opinions. But great channel. And so I started, I just picked up this book because I was intending on reading this sometime this month. And, I just opened it up and just read the first page, and then I read the second page, and the third page, and the fourth page, and the fifth page, and then I guess I was reading the book. This is a really interesting book. It is, if you had to categorize this book, it would be a horror fantasy. That is the best category you could place it in. But it's an interesting one because it also has a lot of philosophy in it. Now, usually, I can restrain my enthusiasm about anything that has anything to do with philosophy. I'm not a huge philosophy fan. But still, despite that, this was a really interesting read. First of all, The Falcon, or Carol Wainwright, is actually a really good writer, which was nice. Someday, I'm going to pick up a booktuber's book and it's going to suck, and that's going to be a dark day. But so far, that hasn't happened. I've been lucky with all the books by booktubers that I've read. And this, I think, is the fourth one that I've read, and this one is an excellent book, really. It tells a really interesting story. It is a post-apocalyptic novel where we have a mysterious figure, a guy we don't know much about his past, but he's got a mission, and his mission is to find a mysterious book, possibly a magic book. Who knows? He doesn't really know anything about this book. All he knows is that in this post-apocalyptic world, in his dreams, he meets a very mysterious woman who he calls the Priestess, who is telling him, hey, you got to find this book. And it'll tell you secrets. And so he's hoping to find some answers, because the apocalypse that has happened in this world is a really super creepy one. Basically, it's kind of like, you know how in H.P. Lovecraft, there's always that danger that one of these horrific beings will kind of take over the world, and then it'll be just nightmare and insanity and awfulness after that. That kind of already happened. Something like that already happened. We've already had kind of some awful thing that has happened. We don't know exactly what it was, but now the skies are always cloudy. You never see the sun. There are strange creatures roaming the land. Normal animals, a lot of them have disappeared, and others have started to shift into other kinds of creatures. There's been an epidemic of suicides because a couple other things have happened. First of all, you can wake up and just have memories from a completely different life. Every once in a while this happens. You'll wake up, and not only will you have your own memories, you'll have memories from a life that you've never lived. And that can happen a couple of times, or 3 or 4 times. And all of a sudden you have all of these memories from lives you know that you've never experienced. And which one is the real life anyway? It kind of gets a little confusing to know. And not only that, but at night, strange whispering noises happen. And if you don't plug up your ears with cotton or something, and you actually listen to these creepy whispers, well, you're probably going to go mad and kill yourself. So, dark, man. It's a dark world that our hero is looking for this book in. And it's interesting. It's a pretty compelling book. Not everything is great about it, but I don't actually have a lot of criticism for this, because it's one of those books that's interesting enough and well written enough that if I had like 3 hours or something, 2 or 3 hours, I would have just sat down and read the whole thing, because it is that compelling a read. But I didn't, so I had to read a little bit here and there. It reminds me kind of, if it reminds me of any other writer, it reminds me a bit of William Hope Hodgson. And he actually has a quote from one of William Hope Hodgson's books in the beginning of this book. So I'm not sure if that's entirely accidental. But if it reminds me of anything, it does remind me of Hodgson, where you have some mysterious things going on, a very strange world, weird stuff happening, and you don't have an explanation for it, at least right away. Like I said, there's a lot of philosophy in this book, and one thing that tends to happen is that when our main character talks to other characters, they tend to talk in Socratic dialogues more than just regular dialogue. So there's a lot of that. So and that's not a criticism, because that's kind of what a lot of this book is about. Like I said, there's a lot of philosophy in it. And so if you're down with that, cool. You're going to be having a good time with this book. If not, but despite the fact that I'm not totally into philosophy, and I don't tend to like that kind of thing too much, I did thoroughly enjoy this. And also, eventually, of course, he finds the book, and the mystery of the book is revealed. It is not a surprise by the end of the book, because the Falcon, or Carol, gives you a lot of clues and kind of lets you know what this book is about by the end of it. So that when our main character actually opens the book and is shocked by what he reads, you are not shocked because you already kind of see where this is going. The ending, I was a little, this was one of those books where I was arguing a lot with the philosophy and with the point of the book in my head as I was reading it. Which I think means this is kind of a success, because I think that's kind of the type of thing that you want to happen when you have a book like this, or when you write a book like this, is you want to provoke that kind of thing. You want somebody to argue with you or to really think about what you're saying. And so while I didn't agree with a lot in here... No! Oh, I'm getting a package. Excuse me. So Rhonda has to scream. Anyway, where was I? Yeah, so even though I didn't agree with a lot of the philosophy in this and a lot of where this book ended up, that's probably not a bad thing. And even if I didn't agree with everything in this book, like I said, it was a heck of a read, and I do certainly recommend this book. Not enough people read this, I don't think. And it is a quality book. It is well written. Like I said, not everything in it is perfect, but you know, what book is? And it's a book more people should read, I think. So here it is. Apocrypha by Carol Wainwright, The Falcon. I will leave his channel information down below, and you know, you can get this on Kindle. I think it's on Kindle Unlimited. And Kindle would be a good way to read this, because the Falcon likes to use words nobody uses, except the Falcon. They're real words, but nobody uses these words except the Falcon. So, you know, it's good to have that dictionary feature. And it's a cool cover, which actually has something to do with the story, and that's always nice. I've gone on and on about that book. What's coming up for reading? Well, in the Edgar Rice Burroughs Deep Dive, this is the next book I'm reading, The Eternal Savage, which was originally titled The Eternal Lover. Good title change, I think. The Eternal Savage is a better title. So that's next. After that, in the Edgar Rice Burroughs Deep Dive, we're returning to Tarzan. It's The Beast of Tarzan, the third Tarzan novel. In between those two, I'll probably read a Sackett book, because Richardson Reads is doing a Sackett read-along along with his Hornblower read-along. And so I probably will read the first Sackett book, which I have in this omnibus edition. And right now, I am reading this, the January 1951 issue of Astounding Science Fiction. I've read the first story so far, which was excellent. I read kind of like the introduction to the magazine from the editor, and The Waiting Game by Randall Garrett, and that was an excellent story. There's an old-timey illustration that I don't know if it's been reprinted since this was printed in 1951. So I read the first story. I'm going to read the rest of it tomorrow. It's going to be awesome. I will catch you next time. Be sure to catch my next video. It's a very important one. It's not really, but catch it anyway. Okay, guys, have a great day.